Hello, and welcome to Journey of a Student Nurse. My name is Lee. So welcome to today's video, and today I'm going to be talking about sensory differences in autism and Aspergers syndrome. So all the information that I'm going to share today is evidence-based, and some of it has come from journal articles, and also most of it is coming from the public domain. And particular source I'm using today is from the National Autistic Society. So this information that I'm sharing is readily available. I'm also going to be sharing some personal experiences I have as well of sensory differences and sensory processing, and then kind of relate that into the general stuff itself. So to sort of help construct this video, I'm going to break it up into two parts. First part, I'm going to talk about what sensory differences are, and then I'm going to go on talk about in the second part about my own personal experience. So going into the first part, so sensory differences affect many people on the autistic spectrum, and most autistic people or people who have Aspergers have difficulty processing everyday sensory information. Any of the body's senses can be affected, whether that is sight, smell, taste, touch or sound. There is an additional two senses, which is your balance and your proprioception. I'm not going to be covering those in this video today. That is probably another video for a later time. But any of these senses can be affected in one of three ways. First way is they can be oversensitive or hypersensitive, and they can be undersensitive or hyposensitive, or there can be a bit of both, at times. So it's kind of mixed match. You can either be oversensitive or be undersensitive, or have that combination of the two. And these sensory differences can affect an individual's behaviour, and these can have a significant impact on an individual's life. So, and that can affect relationships, and it can affect, sort of day-to-day tasks, doing simple things in the house, like doing your chores, like doing dishes, laundry, etc. Or if you're at school, you're at college, you're at university, you're working, they can have impacts in these areas. So, I'm going to sort of kind of move on now and talk a bit about the more specific stuff. As I mentioned, we have our five main senses, and they can be affected in one of three ways. So it's that oversensitivity, so you're getting too much, at one time. So for example, if you're affected by sound, you might be hearing too much noise, there's a lot of noise going on around you, and that can make a person feel quite anxious and make them want to withdraw, and it can cause them to feel quite overwhelmed. An additional thing there would be is a person is not able to block out certain sounds, and there might be someone tapping on the desk like that. It might be like chatter at the other side of a room. It's very difficult to block out certain noises. On the opposite, somebody again who may be affected by sound may enjoy being in crowded environments. They may enjoy loud noises. Some people, it's a mix of both, and it's a very sort of quite subjective, and it changes all the time. But nonetheless, it's quite important to be aware of the sort of oversensitivity or the undersensitivity, as quite often it's usually one or the other. If it's going to be a combination, it's kind of a bit, sort of here and there, and that's, again, this has come from personal experience, and I'm going to talk a wee bit more about that in just a moment. So one of the campaigns at the National Autistic Society, which is a UK-based charity, they have a campaign called Too Much Information, and this campaign is out there to raise awareness of sensory sensitivities that individuals have. And in 2018 they launched another great video called Diverted, and it's a fantastic video to watch, as it follows the sort of journey of a lady throughout the day, and it shows how she is, how the sensory differences affect her in her daily life. And quite often they're very similar for many on the autistic spectrum. There's many similarities in that in that regard. But nonetheless, it can impact quite significantly on what a person does and what they don't want to do. So it's just kind of touching on that on a very basic level, kind of what the sensory processing is. I'm trying not to give too much information in this video, as at the moment I want to be able to introduce this topic and then build on this in later videos. And I'm kind of planning to talk a bit more about these specific senses, in videos of their own. So I'm going to do videos on sight, sound, smell, taste and touch in the future, and kind of build on that and be able to go in a bit more detail about that. But I'm kind of moving on into this second part. How does sensory processing affect me? Like I said at the start, it is very much kind of affects very much most, but if not all, my senses. I can be oversensitive, undersensitive to certain stimuli, or I can have a combination of the two. But nonetheless, they do have a significant impact on my life. And I want to quickly touch on how that affects me in being a student nurse. You're probably going to think the ward environment, or a busy kind of accident and emergency department, very busy admission areas in the hospital where people are kind of rushing about. There's lots to do very much of the time. It can be quite busy. Lots of sounds going off, like call bells going off. People screaming, etc. Hospital's not an ideal environment sometimes for someone who is a patient, at the best of times. But also for somebody who is autistic, the hospital is not a brilliant environment. For me, I find the hospital not too bad, as I have chosen to be a student nurse. I have chosen that I want to be in that environment, and I recognise that there's going to be very foul smells, there's going to be loud noises, there's sights that I'm going to see, that I might not like, the lighting might not be perfect, there might be things that may affect me there, I might have people bumping into me, grabbing onto me, touching me and things like that I might not like, and I've chosen to accept that, okay, that's going to be part of my job, that's what I've chosen, that's what I've signed up for. Will that necessarily mean that I like it? No, but you kind of just got to get on with that. So, kind of how does sensory processing affect me generally away from the hospital? And mostly in my day-to-day life, two of my senses are mainly affected, and that is sound and touch are the two that affect me the most. Smell, sight and hearing, sights, smell and taste, are the three that don't affect me too much. I find that maybe taste is maybe the small exception of the rule, because I'm a bit undersensitive and I quite like spicy foods. However, sight and smell, not too bad actually. There is probably going to be something that triggers off, and I probably had something that triggers me off, but again, it's not too bad. But the two that tend to affect me most, as I said, are my hearing and being touched. So starting off with hearing. So quite often, if I'm in an environment which is quite crowded, quite noisy, it's quite triggering, and it can put me into sensory overload, and it can lead me to have a bit of a meltdown of the senses, and it's really difficult to block out certain noises, and it can be quite overwhelming. And that's the one really that triggers me off the most. And I do struggle to block out certain noises. As I mentioned, some people may not be able to block out certain noises, like a person tapping, having whispering conversations at the other side of a room. It can be quite distracting. It can be very hard for me to concentrate in that environment, and it leads me to getting distracted quite easily. So again, that is something that I've learned to recognise, and I've learned coping mechanisms. I'm learning coping mechanisms all the time, I should say, to cope with that. The next one, to kind of briefly go over, is I'm quite oversensitive to touch. If I'm in an environment like a lecture theatre where you're kind of sitting shoulder to shoulder with people, and it can be quite difficult. And if if I'm in the supermarket, people bump into me, it's not always a nice thing, or if people just want to maybe give me a hug or pat me on the shoulder. If I don't know the person at all, I'll be like, you do not touch me, I do not want that, and I'll just say it's not, unless I gave you permission, that is the sort of no-go. You know, that's kind of how I've learned to sort of say, maybe it's a bit abrupt, maybe it's a bit, comes off as a bit rude, but I've kind of, that's maybe not the best coping mechanism, but for me it's kind of that fight or flight reaction. You know, sometimes I will say that as the no, don't do that. Other times I just try and get out of the environment as quick as I can. You know, that is something that I've learned to recognise. If I'm in a lecture theatre, it is a slightly different story, because I have a very good group of friends at university who I sit with all the time, and I don't mind, you know, maybe them bumping into me as much, or or them sort of whispering, because I find that, you know, I recognise who they are, I know who they are, and I'm used to them, you know, and I've let them into my personal space. There's a bit more of my personal space, and that's something that I've recognised over the years. So that is just me drawing this video to a conclusion, and I hope this has been informative, and I hope it's been helpful in many ways. As I said, I'm going to be building more on these topics in the future when I do more content. But if you have enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe to the channel. It shows me great support, and it shows it just encourages me to keep creating these videos. And if you push the wee bell beside the subscribe button, it will notify you when I post a new video. At the turn of the new year, I am trying to plan to do more videos come 2019. So I've kind of so be on the lookout for more of my videos. So thank you for your time, and hope you all have a very good new year when it comes, and happy Hogmanay to my friends in Scotland.